feel self-conscious talking in the library, but we'll do it anyway. It is a great joy to be at the Michael J. Petrides School here in Staten Island and to announce that this will be one of 64 new Prose schools that we are announcing today. And that will be doubling the total number of Prose schools in our school system. This is one of the most exciting developments in education in New York City. The Prose concept is rewriting our approach to education from the ground up. We engage the people who do the work, the educators, and their principal to figure out what will work for that school and that school community, to innovate, to reform, to come up with that which will be most effective in serving the children of the school. And we said this back at the time when we announced the contract with our teachers last year, but I'll say it again and again. This means not only the ability of a school community to suspend their DOE work rules, it also gives them the ability to suspend their union work rules, to create an entirely new approach and a more flexible approach to get the job done the way they see fit. There is tremendous energy among teachers to take full advantage of this opportunity, to rewrite the rules in the way they think will help them best to serve the children who they're here, who their lives are devoted to. They're here because of these children. They want to serve them. They want to better their lives. And teachers all over the city welcome the opportunity to do it their way, to work within the school community to figure out what makes sense for them. And it's exciting. This is reform on a grand scale. Remember when we said at the time the contract was announced, our vision was to have up to 200 Prose schools over the coming years. Originally, we thought that could be as much as a 5-year build-out. Right now, at the rate we're going, there will be 200 Prose schools by the end of next school year. There's been extraordinary embrace of this idea. And I remind you, when I say this is reform on a grand scale, I want to put this in the context of our nation, and I will have our excellent communications team get you the exact facts. But there are not many school systems in America that have more than 200 schools. This is a huge endeavor. This is going to be a national model for reform, and one that I think is going to bear fruit very quickly because it's unleashing the energies of our teachers. Now, I want to thank all who are here with me today. I'm going to acknowledge a couple of folks, and you'll hear from the others in just a few moments, but I want to thank, of course, the principal of this great school, Joanne Buckheit. Let's thank her for all she does. And I want to thank the Executive Vice President for the Council of School Supervisors and Administrators, Mark Cannizzaro. Thank you, Mark. Now, I think I have made clear over the years, I am a public school parent. I have, 4 more weeks of having that distinction. And I see the work we do on education through the eyes of my fellow parents. We know we have some of the very best schools in the entire nation. A recent report made very clear, not just some of the best schools in the state, some of the best schools in the nation here amongst our New York City public schools. We also know we have too many schools that are not succeeding. They're not reaching every child, and we're not doing well enough in every neighborhood. And there's a lot that we've said we would do to change that, and it has to be aggressive, and it has to be fast, and it has to be energetic. So we laid down all sorts of building blocks to start to make this intensive change. The community schools effort, the after-school and extended learning time efforts, renewal schools, pre-K, more teacher training hours, more hours for teachers to engage with parents. These are all items of a reform agenda that have put in place just in the last 16 months. And we're implementing them all simultaneously and intensively. We know we have to do even more, and part of it is reimagining how our schools can best serve our children. And those who are best suited to do that are our educators. And that's what brought us to the Prose concept. Let the people who know how to educate do what they know best. Let them apply the tools and all the learning they have. free them of those work rules so they can innovate. What does it mean? And it depends on each school, of course, but some of the things that are options and that are being implemented at Prose schools already: longer school hours, weekend sessions with students, or for additional teacher training and preparation, more one-on-one time between teachers and students, all resulted over the last year since the new contract went into place. 62 Prose schools announced last year, 64 more we're announcing now. And you see, we achieve longer school days through staggering teachers' schedules so we can serve more kids with more hours. We've rearranged in some schools the calendar for more professional development time, both full and half-day professional development. We know professional development is what makes for better teachers. We have a lot of great teachers. We have a lot of teachers who can be even greater if they get that training like in any other profession. It's also part of how we retain great teachers is that they constantly get to improve their professional capacity. And that is consistent with our approach also to deepen the role of parents in the educational process, which is why we're putting more and more time into engaging parents and having teachers and parents figure out collaboratively how to reach our children. Petrides is a school that has a long history of innovation, named after the beloved Staten Islander and dynamic educator, the late Michael Petrides. He was someone who believed in creativity in education. He created college-style classes to ensure the students would be college-ready. And I was thrilled in the class we just visited now to see some of that same spirit in a new form. Those young people in the combined chemistry and physics class thinking the way college students would think, collaborating on a level that you would only imagine would happen in a college classroom. So much of Petrides' vision is being updated and applied today under our circumstances. The flexible class sizes and the special office hours to help students who need a little more help. You're going to hear from one of the Rodriguez brothers in a moment. They are doing something extraordinary. They have been teaching for 16 years, Carlos Rodriguez and his brother Antonio. Carlos is a physics teacher, Antonio a chemistry teacher. And they realized if you brought the two ideas together and different levels of students, they could all help each other learn. And the students we visited with were so clear about the fact that that conversation between them on the subject matter was helping the younger and the older students to learn. It was getting everyone involved, not just the kids who might participate the most historically. It was helping them to figure out how to apply the concepts in everyday life. It was preparing them. They were very explicit about this. They knew it was preparing them for college because they were thinking in a manner that was like that which they would confront up ahead. And Carlos said something powerful about what the Prose school approach and the reform approach will mean here. He says it's like a second wind for the school. The energy it will create is priceless. Now, I will say that energy, that ability to innovate and to move quickly, because the changes we need in our schools have to happen right now. They can't wait. Whether you're talking about pre-K or after school or teacher training or parent involvement or renewal schools or community schools or Prose schools, they have to happen now. They can happen now because of mayoral control of education, because the buck stops here and we have the ability to move things with speed. And it's important that our friends in Albany understand that. I'll be going to Albany in a few days to talk to them about mayoral control and other issues. It's important for those who care deeply, and I know they do, about the future of education, to understand mayoral control allows for speedy improvement and reform. So we're going to keep building on this momentum. Not only do we have to get it right now for the kids in school now, we have to create momentum for deeper reforms that will then serve generations of New York school children going forward. And our goal is very clear. We will not stop until we reach every child, and we believe we can. Just quickly in Spanish. Hoy expandimos el programa Prose a 64 escuelas. Estas escuelas tendrán ahora más libertad para crear programas de ayuda para sus estudiantes. Queremos asegurar el éxito académico de todos los estudiantes. With that, whether she speaks English or Spanish, she is equally articulate about the changes we are making in our schools, and she's doing an extraordinary job as the leader of our school system, our Chancellor, Carmen Freña.
It's a pleasure to come here and see how it's moved to the upper grades. I want to be clear that Prose is not a product. Prose is a process. And the one thing that I have to say about Prose, it's intellectualizing the profession. This is about what teachers want, what they need to discuss with each other, and maybe even fighting a little bit over it. This is not about a formula. It's not about robotics. It's not about taking something off the internet and say we want to put a rubber stamp, we want the same thing. This is about staff, and I'm sure, Joanna, it took many months of discussion. It's about bringing everyone to the table and talking not just about what you want to do, but why you want to do it. And for a long, long time, a lot of things in education were either mandates or sent down for a 65% vote. In this school, it was 85% vote for this particular Prose. And that, to me, says that once you tell teachers, what do you need in your specific school? This is not about taking something cookie cutter and moving it into another building and another building. And I think that was really, when we went to contract negotiations, we were very clear that this had to be school-specific, teacher-specific, parent-specific. Parents were brought into the discussion here. They were brought in to talk about how this is preparing their kids so there are no surprises. Because it's not about how many kids you have in a class. It's what's happening when the kids are in that classroom. So to me, Prose is one more example of intellectualizing the profession. We also have out in Staten Island Learning Partner Schools, Showcase Schools. All of these are schools that are trying something different and going outside their own walls to learn how to make things better for kids. So ultimately, to me, student achievement, but also teacher retention are two of the byproducts of what I expect to see out of Prose. Thank you. Oh, en español. Estamos aquí en una escuela hoy que es un ejemplo lo que pasa en una escuela cuando las maestras, los padres y los directores se juntan para ver lo que tienen que hacer y cambiar para que los estudiantes aprendan más y mejor. Y en esta escuela, por ejemplo, lo que está pasando es que en vez de tener una clase solamente, hay dos clases juntas y entre ellos están hablando lo que tienen que aprender para poder seguir yendo al colegio más alto y que allí también pueden coger buenas marcas. Gracias.
So we've had a real partner in this effort, and I know that Michael Mulgrew believes deeply in this concept of innovation, reform, and unleashing the energies of our teachers, as Carmen Freña said, the intellectual capacity and the intellectual grounding that goes into the work of education being opened up so teachers can create. And I want to thank Michael for his partnership as the Prose effort continues to grow. Michael Mulgrew, President of UFT.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the school. This is a massive undertaking to become a Prose school, and this school really had a massive undertaking. What you are doing here, completely changing all of your scheduling, the way you program children, how you assign teachers to classrooms is a massive undertaking. And I was just talking to Mr. Gonzalez, and I said, that's a lot of work. And he says, it's okay. We're up for it, and this is something we wanted to do. And you have to understand, I'm going to try to put this in context. We now have in New York City approximately 126 Prose schools. That's either the third or fourth largest school district in the state. So just think of that. And every one of those schools went through this process where they sat down and not only said, what do we want to change, they figured out how to make it all work by bringing all stakeholders together. And it's about creating new ways of thinking about education. It's about creating new ways to say, what are the fair guidelines for us to work under as long as it makes sense to everyone, and so this way we can bring everyone along. And that's why I'm so proud of the Prose program. And I can't thank this school enough, and Concord High School, so I'm a Staten Islander, so I'm going to take a little privilege here. We have our first 2 Prose schools in the borough. And going forward, you know, when we announced the contract, we received, there was some, the nicest way to say it, there was some hecklers on this provision. There were some hecklers on the side who said, oh, they just put that in there, it'll never be real. Well, we now have 126 schools in a year and a half. That's a massive amount of work, and we're making it real. And it's about communities coming together to make Prose what we always want to be. And other schools now visit the Prose schools. We had schools working all year who applied last year and didn't make it. They worked all year with a team, and I want to thank my UFT team and the DOE team. You guys were great. They spent an entire weekend reading applications, morning, noon, and night. What you did was fantastic. But more importantly, to the school communities and to the parents and to the teachers and the administrators here, thank you for what you've done. You make us all proud, and we're going to continue to move forward. Thank you very much.
And Michael, it's only been a year since the contract was signed.
That is correct, May 4th.
A year. This has been done in the context of just 1 year. We have been doing a lot of work on many different fronts in terms of the needs of Staten Island. And one thing I could say about the borough president, as soon as we finish one mission and have one accomplishment, he calls immediately with the next topic. Literally, that happened. Let's see, we were together on Thursday, and on Friday, you were raising a host of additional concerns, proving your commitment to public service. I want to thank him for all the partnership and the constant collaboration we do. Borough President Jimmy Otto.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and welcome back to Staten Island again. If you keep coming to Staten Island at this rate, some folks might have to search for new narratives, so be careful. I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, for remembering Michael Petrides, because this campus that we're on today very easily could have been headquarters or office space for the DOE, or very easily could have been Touro College. And it was the great Mike Petrides who had a better vision for this property. And today's announcement builds on his vision and his foundation. So thank you for remembering him. I've been at Borough Hall for 16 months, and I think one of the best things I've done so far, and as long as I'm Borough President, one of the best things I will have done is hire that lady over there, Rose Kerr, to be the head of education. Rose was the founding principal of the Staten Island School for Civic Leadership, and Rose was an innovator. And again, today's announcement to me is building on the foundation of people like Rose. When I was in the council in the Mid-Island, we had the principals roundtable where I would meet with my principals, no other DOE staff. They could speak straight to me. And we've continued that at Borough Hall, and I've gotten a chance to get to know some of my North Shore and South Shore principals. And these are wonderful educators, and you are giving them, collectively, all of you, a chance to really dig deep and tap into the potential of all of our kids, and I want to thank you for that. And I will just close by paraphrasing Churchill, who said, change in the right direction is a good thing, and I think this is a change that has definitely been in the right direction. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of it.
Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Buckheit, for a fantastic job.
Excellent. Thank you. The renowned Rodriguez brothers were referenced earlier. Representing the two of them is one of them, Carlos Rodriguez, who is the physics teacher of the two. And Carlos, we saw the extraordinary energy in your classroom. And I have to tell you, it's just so inspiring to see the level of participation, the energy to learn, the energy to help each other learn. That's a credit to what you have created for your students, and we thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Carlos Rodriguez.
So I've been here at the Michael J. Petrides School for a number of years, and I'd like to speak to the collaboration that occurs here between the administrators, the principal, and the teachers. You know, the process of Prose, and just even applying, brought up to the front just how well the teachers work together and what it means to have ideas that are respected and ideas that matter. And we all have one goal, and that's really to help the children. We want to teach them the best way we can, and we want to see them successful in life in the pursuit of knowledge as lifelong learners. I became a teacher because of my mother, She taught for 30 years in the public school system on Staten Island and PS 38. And I remember as a child going to visit her class with my brother and watching her do science. And one of the most interesting, we'll call it the coolest things, is when I had some of her students in my class later on. So it's a tradition on Staten Island. So she inspires me to do the best I can. Now, the flexibility in being a Prose school allows us to implement innovative pedagogy created through the collaboration. This is the key, and this is what occurs at the Michael J. Petrides School. Going back to our mission, we are committed to creating an environment for learning that nurtures the whole child. Prose will allow us to do this. The flexibility in Prose will allow us to do what it takes to meet the needs of the children. So on behalf of the staff, I would like to thank the mayor,
Over here.
the chancellor, the Department of Education, and the United Federation of Teachers for making Prose available to our school. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we are going to do, you've seen it before, on topic, followed by off topic. Yes?
If the Prose concept is so great for the kids, why cap it at 200? And moreover, why subject it to negotiation? Why not implement it wholesale?
I think we are going to, as I said, hit 200 by next year and then keep going. We've already talked about continuing to build this out. 200 again is a huge endeavor, and we will constantly be monitoring to make sure that it is working up to our expectations. But we're very, very encouraged so far. So I think the sky's the limit here.
So why should it be subject to negotiation if everyone...
Well, again, the initial, I think, when you talk about something that is a transcendent approach, it really was. We used to have both, in all schools, of course, both the DOE work rules and the union work rules were given. To say that we're now going to take, over a tenth of our school system, end that, create local innovation and reform in the course of just a few years, that's a pretty big commitment right away. But I think it's just going to keep building out. I think it was right to do it initially through negotiation because it was necessary for contractual reasons and legal reasons. But I think what we're finding now is there's such great enthusiasm that I think it'll be very natural. I think I will not speak for Michael, and Michael will speak for himself, but I think it will be a very natural thing to keep building further.
To your question, the minute you start mandating it and putting it top down, it's not going to work. So it's the very process itself. And I give the mayor a lot of credit because not a lot of people would have come in as mayor and said, I believe in the people in the school and we're going to create this process. And I believe that they're going to innovate to a way that's going to take our school system to a much better place. And it is that process. Just imagine this. The people in this school not only voted 85% for massive changes in their workday, they also voted to work harder than they ever did before because that's what's going to be required for them to implement this plan. And that's what happened because they were respected as professionals and were part of the process. You come in from above saying, I have a better idea and therefore you're going to do this, that's not going to work because you've never engaged them in the right way. This is education at its finest. You cannot teach your students unless you engage them. You're not going to make substantial changes unless you engage and empower the people who've chosen to be in that classroom every day, and that's the educators.
Just quick follow on that. Again, I think it's part of human life. I think everyone in every profession feels it. If you are respected to apply the tools of your trade and to innovate and create, it's a much more engaging workplace. People are able to get more done. They inevitably get more committed. I think we had a problem in this city previously where, there was a questioning of our educators and a suggestion implicitly that they were not interested in doing the work. Well, I've known thousands of educators over the years, and what I have found is the overwhelming majority are deeply committed to the work. So I think this is to borrow from Marshall McLuhan here, the media is the message saying we're opening up the process to reform. We are not only achieving the specific reforms in individual schools and innovations, we're also sending a larger message to our educators that we believe in them. And I believe that will make them more productive. I think anyone who is legitimately told that they have a lot to offer and that they're making an impact is going to achieve more than someone who's put down.
Yes. How are are you measuring the success of the program? Are you looking at grades? How are you measuring the success of the program?
I'll let the chancellor speak to it, but I say on everything, multiple measures. I mean, we are believers in multiple measures, so we're never, just looking at one test, for example. We also know that this is something that's very promising, again, as a model on a much bigger scale in this school system. So we're not going to pass final judgment on it after just 1 or 2 years. We're going to give it time to build and grow because it's so tremendously promising. But I'll let the chancellor speak to it more specifically.
Well, obviously, student achievement is always going to be something we look at, and the scores will be coming out over the summer, so we'll look at that. But we're also going to be looking at teacher satisfaction and teacher retention. We're also going to be looking at part of the Prose as well as the other learning partners and showcases, how many visitors schools have. One of the things we've asked Prose schools is to be open to visitors so we can highlight the work here. So after this school starts in September, how many schools come and visit and then take on the same work. So there's going to be multiple measures of looking at it. But to me, once teachers, nationally, the concern is teachers are not staying in teaching. I'd like to reverse the trend and say that in New York City, teachers are going to stay in teaching because we respect them. We really encourage them to be creative thinkers. And we're also saying if you apply to the school that's going to fill your needs, that this is something that is good for society as a whole. So I think there's going to be multiple measures.
Are you measuring parents' response and reaction?
Oh, absolutely. Everything we do has a parent component, and that's going to be out in the snapshot, the school reports that we put out, these parent surveys in this school already. Parents came to an extremely well-attended parent meeting about the Prose, and they were very enthusiastic. So it's also about how do we dialogue deeper with each other? For too long in education, we told people what to do, and then we reported what we did. This is about talk and talk and talk. And this also goes to the whole relationship, I think, between the DOE and the CSA and the UFT. It's about talking to each other, dialoguing. What do you think? What do we think? How do we make this better? And always keeping in mind what's the end result as far as kids' student achievement.
So just a quick note from our crack research team. So I mentioned what 200 schools meant in broader perspective. So Buffalo, New York, for example, has fewer than 100 schools. Boston has approximately 130 schools. I mean, we'll get to the exact numbers, but 200 schools constitutes, again, something that's equivalent to the school system of one of our largest cities. Rich.
Can you zoom in on how this has changed something specific, just to give us, the uninitiated, some idea of what this does?
Sure. Let me start and then pass to Carmen. I mean, for example, by staggering teacher schedules, you can do a longer school day. I mean, it's right there, you're already changing the playing field. We have been working at longer school day in several different ways. The after-school effort for middle school kids is one example, and I remind you that is going to, in the coming school year, be something that is universally available to our middle school children. Any middle school child who wants after school has the ability to stay 3 more hours in an educational setting and getting the advantages of that. Well, another one of the models that comes out of the Prose effort is teachers agreeing to change their schedules so we can stretch out the school day. The weekend activities. In some cases, it will be efforts to support students. In other cases, teacher training and planning. Again, everything being more conducive to teacher training efforts, which we know both improve the quality of teachers and improve the retention of teachers. But let me see if Carmen can add to that.
Well, first and foremost, I would say that the Prose has one major consistent across all schools, that people had to start talking to each other as early as last September when schools came back. In the past, faculty conferences generally were a principal giving out ditto sheets, talking to staff, and staff, if they were lucky, sometimes turning and talking to each other. This changes the whole paradigm of what meetings look like. Meetings are teacher-led. They are teacher-produced. And in many cases, teachers meet without any administrator present. This, to me, is all innovative. It's happened in some schools across the city over time, but it hasn't happened consistently. And we're saying this is a good thing. It also means that instead of a principal saying, I have a good idea, and in this particular case, I believe it was the Rodriguez brothers who went to the principal and say, we have a good idea, and we would like your support. And that changes the whole culture of teaching because the people who are in the classroom should have some say. I would say also that one of the things we're looking at is Prose where the school days are allotted so the teachers can work longer one day, but perhaps not work at all on another day. So a 4-day longer school week and 1 day not so long. And for me, I'm thinking working parents, people who have young children who might want more of a flexible scheduling, the way you have in the business world, saying, well, that's the kind of school that I might want to work in. So we're looking at everything, but I want to say that it's not all about time. It's what's happening with that time. We also have schools where, for example, the teachers have what they call core classes, large groups with maybe 4 adults in it, and then pulling out small groups of kids by their need. This school is one of the innovators in ICT classes, special needs kids incorporated. The class we saw today had a number of those students, and I think it's really to the credit of the principal and the teachers that they see this as a whole other way to reach all kids. So there's a lot of things that are happening differently, and maybe we can put out a sheet that tells you exactly what each of the Prose schools is doing that's different than all the others.
And just to add quickly on the retention point, again, we're going to be talking more and more about this. Again, we've had a huge challenge. You heard what Carmen referenced before. Historically, there's a problem with teacher retention. So we get good, talented people come into the teaching profession and then leave just when they're starting to hit their prime. That problem is growing in many parts of the country, and we're very concerned about it here. Part of what this does is it makes the teaching profession much more engaging. It makes the workplace more engaging. It helps us to attract and keep the best talent. And I've often said that the educational debate is backwards because there's a focus on the small number of teachers who don't belong in the profession, and we're very aggressively addressing that. We need to focus on the many who do belong in the profession, but too many of whom we're losing. So to really get down to what's going to serve our kids, we've got to stop losing the best talent, and we think the Prose effort is going to be one of the tools to address that.
For the Chancellor, Chancellor Ferdinand.
Congratulations on your anniversary.
Thank you.
10 years.
10 years next week, yes. Thank you. To become a pro school, do you need to be a high-performance school? Is it are they failing schools? And these schools, are they getting extra funds from the Department of Education? And if you can answer it both ways.
I would say that the majority of the schools are really featured that have an innovative staff who wants to make change. It's the criteria. We do expect them to meet certain guidelines, but not all schools are meeting the same guidelines. I think the most important thing for us is that they have good teacher retention so that the teachers who vote on getting this done are actually the teachers who are going to be there to implement the plan. They're not receiving any extra money, per se, but they could have money savings based on the plan that they put together. So if teachers have voted, for example, to do something interestingly with their prep periods, they are not getting paid for that, but they're using that time in an alternative way by their choice. So there's a lot of things that are really different in this, but not necessarily extra money, but money used differently. En este caso, es importante saber que la cosa más importante para tener una escuela que es Prose es que tienen que tener gente en la escuela misma que lo quieren hacer. So, tenemos que mirar a escuelas donde las maestras quieren votar por esto y que las directoras van a estar ahí más de un año y quieren seguir la misma cosa.
Your vision of Prose sounds very much like the original vision of charter schools, which I know has been planted out before. I'm wondering to what extent you've collaborated with charters, to what extent you feel like they've been open and collaborating with you. Obviously, they exist outside of union rules every day, and if you feel like charters have been lacking in that mission to sort of become labs of innovation, how much is the city stepping in now to do that work? And while we're on the subject...
Whoa. That's like that. That's a 14-point run-on question. Let's stop there. You'll get another... We'll come back to you for another part in a moment. And I'll start and pass to Carmen. Okay. The charter movement is very diverse. I've believed this for a long time. I believe this deeply. We work with charter schools. That's what we do. We want to serve the kids who are in charter schools. But we also know the charter movement is exceedingly diverse. There are some charter schools that are exemplary at sharing best practices and innovations with surrounding district schools. There are some that are not. There are some that are very representative of their surrounding school population. In fact, some that go out of their way to recruit more English language learners or special ed kids than the general population of that part of the city. There are others that don't. So I think it's a mixed bag to begin with, like most of human life. There are certainly some that we've had a very good experience with in terms of sharing best practices, and we'll continue to deepen that with any and all charters that want to do that. And I know the Chancellor spent a lot of time meeting with charter school leaders and representatives of the charter movement to talk about how to deepen that collaboration. On the question of what we're doing here, I am very much a believer in what the public sector can achieve. And our schools, as I said, have historically turned out generations of extraordinary people. All those great New York City success stories that we know so well, the vast majority of those folks came out of our public schools. The recent list of the best schools in the country, well represented, were New York City public schools. So from my point of view, we have to take what's right about New York City public schools and build upon it and really make sure it reaches every neighborhood consistently. This is one of the ways we do it. Innovation and reform should be the province of the public sector. And they should be synonymous with traditional public schools. And in fact, there is a fair critique that over the years, not just here but elsewhere, some of our traditional public schools didn't innovate as much as they should have. We don't want to live that way, which is why in this contract, and it was very much in a consensus, we want our schools to be the best in the country, keep innovating until we get there. To me, if you say, okay, some charters are doing a great job innovating, others less so, some practices, others less so, of course, we'll do more of it ourselves. It just makes sense. We have the ability to do it. Why shouldn't we do it? And then on top of that, it's going to make the workplace better for our teachers, help us retain great teachers. It's going to help us reach our kids much and figure out what works and constantly innovate and reach kids with longer hours, all the kinds of things we've talked about we need. So that's why we're committed to it. What was your next?
I just was going to ask, a lot of teachers recently have called on you to sort of fulfill your promise to level address inequality by extending the charter cap. That's not something that you advocated for in the past. I was wondering, as session winds down, what your latest.
I believe what I've always believed. I think right now, I know for a fact that the current rate of growth of our charters in our city schools will take it from approximately 6% of our overall population, approximately 10% over the coming years, just with natural growth. And then there's additional space for other charters to be. So I think there is room for the charter movement to grow in the city right now, and I do not think we need to increase the cap. But more to the point, under any scenario, the vast majority of our kids are going to be served by traditional public schools, and I've said consistently we've got to have a breakthrough there. And the Prose schools, again, reaching a level of 200 schools just for starters, means this public school system will be at the forefront of innovation and reform in the nation. Grace.
The point that you just made when you were saying innovation and reform should be synonymous with public schools, I think that some people might hear about this program and say, well, if the thing that's preventing that from happening in all schools are union rules, then why are they there in the first place? I'm wondering if you can address that, both you, Mayor, and also Mr. Muldrow.
Well, let me just...
Rules, some people might say that those sound, based on this announcement, like they're prohibiting or inhibiting, not allowing innovation to take place.
So let's go back to the beginning. Why do we have unions? And I don't mean to be flip here. I'm saying we should think about this as a question of public policy, because unions protect the interests of working people. They ensure that they have a decent standard of living, they have benefits, and they often are able to raise real concerns that have to be addressed for the work to be done right. So the reason for unions makes all the sense in the world to me. Within the collective bargaining context, I think we can say, obviously, over the years, some work rules were smart and some were ill-considered, or over time proved to be ill-considered. What we're doing here is reopening that situation in a very productive way and letting the school community decide. This is not just happening here in New York City. It's starting to happen around the country, where this generation of educators is saying, we want the freedom to do things our way. We're unionized, believe in being unionized, but we want the freedom to do things in an innovative manner. So I think this actually lets us get the best of both worlds. Either you want to, Chancellor? You'll get your chance.
I want to be clear that you can't universally change all the rules simultaneously, because you need to have quality control. And I think Prose gives us quality control. But I want to be clear, I would never have stayed a teacher 22 years in the classroom was a long time for any administrator. And I stayed because I think about my 21st year. My principal said, what can I do for you specifically to keep you here longer? And she created something that in those days was really, we kept it under the radar. I worked 4 days, I worked 4 days a week, and I was allowed to hire my own sub on Fridays. And on Fridays, I actually went throughout all of District 15, and then across the city making connections. And that's how I got to be known citywide. And the reality is, if there was a Prose at the time, we would have applied for it. There wasn't. So meanwhile, it all had to be kept hidden. It was kept private. It was done in a way, but I stayed in the classroom an additional 2 years, and that's where I really see this going. And Michael certainly, I know, believes that. I'll let him speak for himself. We need teachers who want to do something differently and have a mechanism to do it, while still saying not everybody's ready for this yet. And as we do more of this and people come and visit these schools, they'll say, oh, I see where you're going now. But it is more work. It's harder work. But ultimately, it's about making sure that each school does what's right for that school. This can't be about all 30 schools do this simultaneously.
I thank you for your interesting question. I want to be clear here. There are great schools all over New York City who are not Prose schools. But you got to get this. There's a little misconception here. Prose is a union rule. We're not. It's a process inside of our contract that says if you on your work site want to do things differently, and you have an agreement with management, and the majority, a large portion of the folk are part of that, and agree with you that you want to try that in a new way, you have the right to go and do that. That's what Prose is. It is part of the contract between the UFT and New York City. So it's just taking it to a step further where I, as a teacher, we did a lot of creative things in my school. I don't know if they followed the contract, but we did them because this was something we agreed upon. So it's really about, this is saying, if you want at your work site to change the labor management relationship because you think it will allow you to serve the children in your care in a better way, and it's well thought out, and everybody understands it, so it has a chance to succeed, your union, in its agreement with the city, supports you to do that work. That's what Prose is, okay?
On topic.
So, I mean, is the ultimate goal here, mechanically speaking, as far as changing rules or not, to change some of the rules? Or, you know, if you see some of this is working well, I mean, what's the long-term goal as far as the
To quote Jimmy Otto, quoting Winston Churchill, change is good, or whatever the quote was. Change is good. Yes, of course we want constant. Yeah. There is nothing wrong with change if it is in the right direction. All right.
Be a press conference without a
Thank you.
placard.
Thank you, Mr. Otto. Yeah, we need change by definition. We are not where we want to be. And so part of what we're doing is we are attacking on, I'll continue the Churchill analogy, we are attacking on many fronts. And it's a very assertive strategy. I said when I was running for office, I'll say it right here in front of you, the status quo in New York City education is unacceptable. So we are going to transform the entire school system. We introduced early childhood education, which was sorely lacking, more after school and other extended hour efforts, more teacher training, more parental engagement, renewal schools, community schools, which are both very, very different structural approaches to education in those schools. But you need all of these approaches more and more and more, and we have to crack the code on teacher retention because that's going to underlie all of our ability to transform. So the Prose schools fit all those other strategies, and I think they'll be particularly helpful in terms of teacher retention. And yes, that freedom, who doesn't want that freedom in their workplace to innovate, to create, to reform? It is natural for professionals to want that ability to create. And so we're going to do that on a bigger and bigger scale. So phase one, 200 schools, as I said, in national context, a huge and fast jump. There'll be more where that came from.
On a bigger and bigger scale, though, I mean, would it be done through exceptions to the standard rules or through a rule change?
I think this model is a great model for building out rapidly, and it is done on a cooperative basis. You know, it's very interesting. There, not just here in New York City, around the country, there have been plenty of instances where elected leaders fought with their educators and fought with their unions. And I've said many, many times, go back and look, see if that yielded improvement or not. In my opinion, a lot of those fights were counterproductive. They didn't allow us to move forward. We need unity with the workforce to make the changes that we have to make. And I think this is an effort that says, and again, look around the country because you see this happening more and more places. The grassroots are asking for an opportunity to create and innovate. We're answering that call. We'll be able to build that out more and more rapidly. I agree with the Chancellor 100%. We have to do it in stages to check to make sure it's working the way we hope and to make adjustments. But I think this is the shape of things to come.
I was just wondering, there's only 2 Staten Island schools included, and does that mean that not a lot of Staten Island schools applied and wanted to do this, or is it just they have other,
I think the application process for many schools might have been they weren't ready for it. I think also Staten Island has learning partner schools. We also have showcase schools. We have many other ways in Staten Island of cooperating and being visible. And one of the things I think particularly that stood out for me in Staten Island is for many years it was more of an insular place. And now we have principals who are going to the other boroughs to learn. And people are coming to Staten Island to learn. Your learning partner schools, and for Mark's former school, IS 75 is one of the schools we send a lot of people to. MS 34. There are other schools now coming in. So I think this was definitely a school choice, and it was an option that we gave them. But there are many other options in Staten Island as well to be innovative and to host visitors and be visited.
So wait, just to be clear, like more Staten Island schools, did they apply, or was
I don't
it
know
just
the exact number of the schools. What? We'll get back to you with the exact numbers.
Okay, last call on topic. We are taking questions from journalists. Are those journalists in the back? Student journalists there? Go ahead.
Beginning this year, Petrides became a pre-K through 12 grade environment.
Pre-K through 12, yeah.
So do you feel that Prose would affect the younger students?
Do I think?
Prose would affect the younger students.
I think it'll improve the whole school, right? I think it's something that will, allow, again, for that kind of creativity and energy up and down the line. And I think a school community, and one of the things I feel deeply as a public school parent myself is there's a community that is a school. And if the community is improving, there's a pride, there's an energy that lifts all boats. Yes?
What is, for the first 62 schools, the first cohort, what is expected of them in the second year, if anything different?
Well, first of all, more visitors, a little bit more paperwork, because we want to see on how many of the statistics the data that we expect them to put in, that they will come higher on than perhaps similar schools. But also, like I said, to me, teacher retention, enthusiasm for the work, and the willingness to sell what they've done to others. One of the things that we're hearing across the city, teachers want to say, well, why aren't you trying this to each other? And now also because we're under superintendencies, many of the superintendents are asking schools that are either Prose schools, learning partners, showcase, to share with their colleagues. So my feeling is also, although people may not have formally applied for many things, they're trying some of the strategies that other schools are doing. I know here in Staten Island, many of the schools have visited each other already and are trying pieces of this that don't require major changes. So even small changes are good if they're going in the right direction. I'm going to be using that a lot, too.
Off topic.
Mayor, today there was a headline on the Post that says that you're 45% more likely to be murdered in the Blasio's Manhattan. And looking at the numbers at NYPD today, it says that murders just in Manhattan, compared to last year, we've had 115 compared to 102, during the same period. So do you agree with that headline, that you are more likely to be murdered today?
No, that's sensationalist and that's just fear-mongering. Let's be clear. A couple of facts we have to go through here. First of all, NYPD is doing a fantastic job at driving down crime overall. If you look at major index crimes in New York City, we are down compared to last year to date. We're down from the year before that. So that is an extraordinary record of achievement right there. We have some areas we have to do better in, and we've been very open about that fact. The fact is, in some boroughs, we have seen some increases. In others, we've seen decreases. We have to do better in certain precincts, and we have to do better at addressing the gang problem. because it's abundantly clear what's happening more and more is isolated to a relatively small set of gangs and crews. And more police resources are going to address that problem. And you'll see a series of strategic changes coming up to go at that problem very directly. But no, if you put this year in the context of the years over the last 10, 20 years, we still have one of the lowest, overall index crime, the lowest crime we've seen in years. We look at murders and shootings, two areas where we want to do better, and we believe we will do better in the short term, compared to recent years, still, thank God, very strong. And I think anyone who says that is denigrating the efforts of the NYPD and really needs to look at the facts. Jen, just go down back to
the Daily News had a story today about Vision Zero. There's some mixed results. There's been some high-profile fatalities. Some streets have had more accidents. Do you want to comment on that?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, the work of Vision Zero never ends. So we are constantly looking at intersections that we need to do better at. We've put in measures in a number of intersections. We generally find that those have a big impact. You know, the traffic redesign, the other traffic calming measures, obviously more enforcement, speed limit reduction, speed cameras. But that does not guarantee that every intersection automatically gets better. So in some cases, unfortunately, you're going to have some variation where even someplace where you've taken the right measures, you still have some accidents and some tragedies. In other cases, we have to take. So this is work that never ends. But the overall numbers are very important. So I know the news looked at some specific intersections, obviously perfectly fair thing to do, but I want to refer to the overall numbers. The year before I came in, the pedestrian fatalities were 65 in this city. We drove that down through a variety of Vision Zero measures. That's 65 year to date. I'm sorry, year to date. At this point in 2013, the year before I came in, was 65. In 2014, year to date, after a number of Vision Zero efforts had already begun, we were down to 47. Year to date now, we are down to 44. So if you just look at 2 years ago versus now, 21 fewer pedestrian fatalities. That is unquestionably because of the Vision Zero initiatives citywide. So again, 21 fewer pedestrian fatalities. Now let me tell you about overall traffic fatalities. The year before we came in, again, year to date, 95 at this point in 2013. We started applying Vision Zero. It went down to 91 by this point in 2014. Now it is down to 81 at this point in 2015. 14 fewer overall fatalities. That's a drop of 15%. So Vision Zero is working. We have a lot more to come. There's going to be a lot more enforcement. There's going to be a lot more traffic redesign. This is going to grow in strength with every passing year. Yes, Marcia.
If we could go back to the murder rate for a second. The murder rate overall in the city in the last week has gone up 60%. And I know you've talked about it as a gang problem or drug gangs or whatever, but it's also gone up at a time when we're approaching the hot time of the summer where crime usually goes up. So I wonder what your concerns are about this, what you want to do about it, and what do you say to New Yorkers who are worried that, you know, summer doesn't start for 3 weeks and already the murder rate week to week has gone up 60%?
Yeah, I don't think the week to week is the way to look at it. I think the way to look at it is where we're at this year compared to last year and previous years. We still are at one of the lowest murder rates we've ever had in the history. We have had some sore spots we have to work on. There's no doubt about it. There are certain things we have to do more, certain gang issues we have to address with some additional. Now, not to placate unions. So the bottom line here is we said if the officer on the scene comes to the determination that it was an unavoidable accident, as with any civilian, there is no arrest. If the officer on the scene determines that it was an avoidable accident and it would merit arrest for a civilian, there was a walk sign. The pedestrian is crossing a walk sign. That should not be a situation where a pedestrian is killed. So if the officer on the scene comes to the determination that that is an offense that is worthy of arrest, they will engage in the arrest. They'll do it respectfully. They'll do it in as honorable a manner as humanly possible, but it is the obligation of the NYPD to treat everyone equally, and they will. Yes.
Of public safety, there was a report today in the Post that to needle you, Governor Cuomo is scouting a new barracks to add state troopers. You know, given the contretemps over the 1,000 new cops, what are your thoughts on that?
It's a I think the reporting mischaracterized the situation. It was a small number of additional state troopers for very specific instances, as I understand it. For example, Penn Station patrols. I don't find anything to be concerned about there.
What are you hoping to see in the next state education commissioner, and did the city have any input in the selection?
Well, obviously, that's a decision the regents will make. You know, we want to work closely with the new state commissioner. There's a lot to be done, a lot of reform, as we said here today, that we want to make. And we want to have a very good and close and communicative working relationship. So we're anxiously awaiting the announcement.
I was wondering if you could talk about something the Post reported on recently, this tale of two Flushings, if you will, the school in Flushing where some students weren't allowed into a school carnival because they couldn't afford to pay. You know, they were put into an auditorium instead.
I don't know the facts, so let me just say I will certainly look into it. I've heard it, but I have not heard the facts of the specific case. It's unconscionable to not let children into a school carnival. There obviously has to be a way to allowing kids who can't afford it. So I don't want to cast judgment in this case because I don't know all the facts. I can say as a public school parent, I've been to lots of public school carnivals. Obviously, no child should be excluded because they can't afford to pay.
Do you think the principal should be disciplined for that?
I think we should get the facts. And when I hear the facts, I'll be able to say more. Hold on. No, we're here, Jillian. Sorry. You'll get your chance, brother.
You've been asked a lot about Hillary Clinton in the lead up to a Democratic primary, but former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley is expected to announce his own presidential bid this coming weekend. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on him as a candidate, what you're hoping to hear from him. I know you agree in some areas he's been very outspoken on the TPP, an area where you've spoken out as well. Just kind of want to get your thoughts going.
I don't know him, and I don't know his work that well. I certainly hope he will address the question of income inequality and provide a very vigorous vision for addressing income inequality in this country. And I appreciate that he's opposed to the trade deal because I think it's a deal that will set us back economically. But I just don't know enough about what his vision is.
Open to endorsing him when you learn more?
I've said this a bunch of times, but I'll say it again, happily again. I am looking forward to the day, and I am optimistic. Looking forward to the day when Hillary Clinton lays out her specific vision for addressing income inequality. I think what we've heard from her so far is very promising. I think her history on these issues is very powerful. I think over the next few months, we're going to hear a lot more about her vision, and that's what I'm looking at.
Mr. Mayor, in an interview last week, Police Commissioner Bratton floated the idea that he would be open to amnesty for warrants for low-level offenses, suggesting a potential dramatic change of 1.2 million warrants. Just wanted to get your thoughts on that idea.
Well, that was a broad point that the commissioner made, and one that we're going to be working on between City Hall and One Police Plaza over the coming months. None of us will entertain an amnesty for serious offenses. Those have to be pursued constantly. But there may be some minor offenses where it would be a worthy action to take. But there's going to be a very rigorous process to determine if we think there's a specific reform proposal that makes sense. Yeah, Anna.
Follow-up from a question I asked last week. While I was asking you about the bomb threats to Staten Island schools, 2 more schools were actually evacuated to similar threats, and it spread to an elementary school. So any update to that investigation? I understand the NYPD might have contacted the feds about this, and whether or not you're rethinking school safety.
Well, obviously, the NYPD will address their specific actions, and you should ask them directly. But, from the ongoing conversations we've had, this appears to be one or a handful of individuals. And as you know, one was specifically questioned. Look, it's very, very unfortunate. As a parent, I am certain it makes parents very uncomfortable. But what we've seen here is these are pranks. We're dealing with them between NYPD and school safety and our school officials, and we will continue to deal with them. I don't think there's anything deeper to say than that. Michael?
I just wanted to ask what your goals were, or your or what your hopes were for your trip up to Albany tomorrow, and do you plan on speaking with Governor Cuomo directly about some of your priorities?
I'm looking forward to speaking with each and every one of the leaders in Albany. I'm looking forward to sitting down with Majority Leader Flanagan. And I think it's to emphasize why we think our core initiatives are so important to the well-being of the people of the city. Obviously, we're talking about why we need to extend mayoral control, why we need to strengthen rent regulation, why we think the reforms that we've proposed for 421A will allow us to create a lot more affordable housing and would be fairer in terms of the use of the taxpayers' money. So it's just to go and talk through the vision and hear their concerns and continue to work together looking towards the resolution of these issues over the next 3 weeks or so. Grace.
Just to follow up on that, could you explain why in your 421A proposal you didn't call for there to be a prevailing wage requirement? Why is that?
Well, it's well known that I am a believer in union labor, but I also am a believer in achieving the affordable housing goals that we've put forward. And the only way to achieve those goals is with an appropriate wage level for the creation of affordable housing, which obviously is not based on a profit motive. It's based on a very different design. So I've expressed that to leaders in the labor movement that, this is a pretty sacred mission from my point of view to really produce affordable housing on a grand scale. I think there is a way to do it that accommodates union labor, but not at prevailing wage, so we're trying to find a more balanced approach.
So in follow-up from my first question, some community leaders say that Latino and African American communities are disproportionately affected by the shootings that we've had recently and some of the murders, and they cite that there's an overall lack of policing in these areas. Do you share the same view?
No, I think there's been obviously tremendous police presence in some of the precincts where we have particular challenges. I think it's clear that what we have primarily here is a gang and crew problem. For those of us who were here in the bad old days, when we had 2,000 murders or more a year, a lot of everyday citizens were getting caught in those crossfires. It was a horrible, horrible time. This is equally troubling when individual gang members shoot other gang members, but it's a different reality than what we used to face. It's much more localized to gangs and crews. Now, as painful as that is, and we have to end the loss of life, it also means that our police have a lot more information to work with. And increasingly, we saw this last year. Part of what turned the tide last year and why we had a record year, the lowest number of murders in a generation, is because there were some very major takedowns of gangs. You remember some of them last year. And I think you're going to be seeing a lot more of that. So I can say to my fellow New Yorkers in all communities, a lot of resources are being applied, and where the need is greatest, that's where the greatest resources are.
So it's mainly gang on gang?
Correct. Correct. And that is different than what we knew in the past. It's something we're going to be putting more and more energy into addressing. Mara.
Just a quick follow-up to that. Do you have any sense for why that kind of gang activity is up?
I'm not a criminologist, and I'm sure there's others who could give you more eloquent descriptions. Look, we've seen this all over the country on a much bigger scale than here, and we obviously are going to work very, very intensely to cut off this phenomenon at the knees here in New York City. That's why we're applying a whole host of strategies, everything from gang intervention strategies, which have worked around the country, to takedowns, which we've done on very big scale in some parts of the city, and we will continue to do. So I think it is a larger phenomenon in our country, but one that we're going to be able to arrest. Again, this situation is not just 2015. It's been developing over several years, and yet we had the lowest number of murders in our recent history last year. So I know the NYPD knows how to get at this problem. It's going to take a lot of intensive police work, but they will prevail. Thank you, everyone.